Welcome back, friends. In this video, we'll look at another enhancement to the Hangman game where we will implement what we call the help modes. Now, before going forward, let's first understand what we mean by these help modes. The idea really is that we will tell the user a letter, right? For example, so we help the user with a particular letter. Now, if you really think about it, there are two kinds of help we can provide. One, we could tell the user a letter that is part of the chosen word. So, for example, the word is, let's say, trait, and we can tell him T, right? It can also be a bunch of letters. For example, we can tell all the vowels. On the other hand, we can also help the user by telling the letter which is not part of the given word, right? That also is helpful because that reduces the number of words, the number of letters he or she has to search from. And in fact, again, we could do a bunch of letters, right? So, for example, we can say up to remove 10 letters that are not part of the given word, right? So, both of these are helps. Now, either of this, for it to be meaningful, for this help to be meaningful, the help letters should be the letters that the user has not guessed so far. Because if the user already guessed them, then this not really help if we tell them, right? So with this sort of background in place, let's see what we are going to implement. Well, we are going to maintain lists. We are going to maintain a list of all the letters that are there. So let's say list A to Z, and also a list of letters that are yet to be guessed, right? So because this list is important, we are going to pick letters from here. In the beginning, both lists are going to be the same. Every time a new letter is guessed, correct, incorrect doesn't matter, or a help is provided, we remove that letter from the letter yet to be guessed. Otherwise, from the list yet to be guessed, otherwise the game is not being meaningful, right? So let's just see this in a little bit clear way, pictorial way. So in the beginning, for example, all letters is always A to Z. It stays that way. Yet to be guessed starts with the same way. Say I guess the letter A, I will remove the letter A from yet to be guessed because it's already been guessed, or has been given as help, right? And similarly, let's say I go and do D, so I'll remove D from here. So the list less yet to be guessed keeps getting smaller and smaller as we go on. So to provide help, like I said, we'll pick a letter from the list yet to be guessed. For a correct letter, it must be part of the chosen word. Likewise, for an incorrect letter, it must not be a part of the chosen word. So these two conditions we can detect. For a group of letters, we again we make sure that this list is, they're all chosen from this list only. They can be correct, incorrect, either way. We have to code accordingly. And like I said, after providing the help, also we must update this list yet to be guessed, right? So with these ideas, let's get on with the code and see how we can do all this. Before starting the implementation, I want to make a comment that this particular feature of help does not depend on whether you are using a virtual keyboard or you're using the regular, the answer method that we've done in the class, right? Because it's really about creating extra lists and maintaining them, right? So we are using, I'm going to demonstrate that to you, this whole thing with the virtual keyboard. But like I said, it really, really doesn't matter. And I'll tell you what all changes have to be made to make it work for, let's say, without a virtual keyboard. Like I said, in my case, I'm going to do it with the virtual keyboard. Now, this is same as what we have seen in another video, how to create it. The only thing I've also done additionally is that I've created this variable keyboard ID. And this is noticed local to this sprite letters input, which means that each key in here has got a unique ID, right? And we'll see the benefit of this later on. But notice that whenever I create a clone, I also keep changing the keyboard ID, right? So that way everything has a unique ID, just like what we have done in the snake or tux of math and so on. So each key has a unique ID. In fact, the ID goes from 1 till 26, the way we have done this, right? Now, like I said, I'm going to create two lists over here. So I think I already have those lists. So when the so it's got all letters and yet to be guessed. When the flag is clicked, I'm going to obviously delete everything from these lists. So, I'll go here, say, delete all of, say, all letters, and delete all of, yet to be guessed. Now I must also populate them as the clones are formed. I can do that from this my block create keyboard. So what I do is that every time before a clone is created, I go and add the costume name to both these lists. Remember at the beginning, both these lists have to be exactly the same. So I can just add for both of them the this costume name, right? So I'll just say add. I'll put two of these statements again here. So first will be all letters. Next one is yet to be guessed. And both cases, I'm just going to add costume name to the list. So be a little bit careful here. It has to be costume name, which means you must drag it in and use the drop down to go to costume name. And again, it should be costume name. Right now, we can just see this working. So let's say I go and highlight these two lists, say all letters and letters and say yet to be guessed, right? So when I click the flag, I expect both of them to go up to 26 letters, and that's indeed the case, right? And notice the both the lists contains, let's say, A, B, C, D until Z, right? As we had indeed planned, yeah. Now, remember that whenever I enter a new letter, right, that it must be taken out from yet to be guessed, because that's letter has already been guessed, right? So how do I do that? Well, it's actually quite simple. I'm going to delete a particular item from this list called yet to be guessed. Remember, all letters will not be changed, but I will delete this letter from the yet to be changed, and I must do it inside this loop over here, because this is where the letter is being selected, right? So once I select the entered letter, I can go and say delete, say, no, not this, I'll have to use delete, you know, say in this case I'll say delete item number of entered letter in yet to be guessed. Right now, let's just do this and it'll be clear. So I'll say uh, item number of, say, in yet to be guessed. Right now, item number of here entered letter. Now why is it that I'm using entered item number? Because remember, if I entered letter C, so for example, if I enter letter C, then I must delete item number 3 from this, right? If I enter letter, say for example, K, I must delete item number 11 from this list, right? Now we can see this in action again. The moment I come in here, doesn't matter whether so word is called code, so it doesn't matter really. If I click a letter, let's say, if I click, let's say A, then the A happens to be right word also, and notice my yet to be guessed has been removed. Let's say I go and choose F. I see F has been removed from this list, right? So yet to be guessed is coming in and getting removed here, right? Now at this point, like I said, if you are not doing a virtual keyboard, it doesn't matter, because really, if you're not doing a virtual keyboard, then instead of entered letter, everything happens through this answer, right? So whenever I ask a guess a letter and wait, I can do the same thing with the answer. So I can say item number of answer in that list and so on. In fact, on that note, when the game starts, if you do not have a virtual keyboard, doesn't matter, you can still create those two lists, yet to be guessed and all letters, using the costumes. Of course, you have to take care, because costumes are here alternating, right? So 2, 4, 6, for example, could be your costumes. You can write a code to populate those lists exactly the way we have done. All right, so now let's say I bring in a sprite called help correct, and the idea is that when I click this sprite, I will get a correct letter coming out for me, and in fact getting displayed over here, right? So let's, I've created the sprite already, given it like a simple green costume, and I've also written this code where I say wait until mouse down touching mouse pointer, and then wait until not, right? So this makes sure that I click it exactly once and only once, right? If you want this to happen again and again, then this whole thing will go inside of forever, but I just want it to happen, say, just once, right? Now, what I've done here is to write a little bit of code, right? I'll put this in here. Now, basically what I'm doing is that I've created a variable called help letter. I'm setting it to empty in the beginning. Thereafter, remember, I want to pick a correct letter. So I keep repeating this loop until my help letter becomes part of the chosen word. And how is help letter chosen? It is chosen from the letter, from the list yet to be guessed, right? So this code, let's see it step by step. So first thing, I set help letter to 0, I mean to an empty string. Reason is because if I do not do this, then I'm not guaranteed that my, this condition will be correct, right? So, I mean, this condition may actually be correct, and basically this loop may never happen, right? So I want to make sure this, I always enter this loop. So I set this to empty, and now my repeat until takes over. After that, I will make sure that help letter is a randomly chosen letter, which is also a part of this word, right? So we can see this ourselves now, at this point. So let's say so the word here is crony. Say I guess C, all right? So, C appears here. Now, if I go and click this thing, I expect one out of these RONY to be my help letter. And let's see if that happens. Indeed, Y is the help letter, right? Now, this will happen only once because we have not put any forever there. If I try this again, let's say this time the word is, say, fusty. If I click this, letter U appears here, right? So that's basically making sure this thing makes sure that loop gets executed. This statement makes sure that the chosen help letter is chosen part of chosen word. This statement makes sure that it is picked up from the list yet to be guessed. Now with this done, in fact, you can imagine that the game is already structured so neatly that the next part is very easy, because now we know that this particular letter is a correct letter and hence can be displayed here. We have made sure of this here, and we already have a mechanism to display the right answer in the correct place, right? So all I really am going to do is that this is not a right answer per se, but instead I'll duplicate this whole broadcast and I'll call it, let's say, I'll call it correct help. Right now I change this here, and notice that here it's not the entered letter that we are interested in. We are interested in the help letter, right? So I'm just going to replace all these entered letters with the help letter, because help letter is the one that I have provided as help, right? So I'll just drag this in the help letter, and help letter, and in fact everything else remains exactly the same. Magically this will work provided I go and call this broadcast from here, just like I was calling correct answer. In here I can go and say broadcast correct help and wait. So you know that by construction the help is correct, and hence I can do all of this, right? So let's just see this in action once again. This time the word is evade. If I click this letter, I get a V over here, right? And V, I also notice, okay, so it has not yet been removed. Yeah, of course it has not been removed because I've just done this from here, and in fact we'll do this next, right? But if I do something from here, it keeps working exactly the same, right? Now, like I said, that we also need to remove this letter from the from the list of yet to be guessed letters, right? So for that purpose, I'm going to create a new broadcast. So I'll just call it, let's say, oh, sorry, not this. I'll call it say, I'll use a broadcast here, and I'll just call it remove chosen letter. I already have this here. The purpose of this broadcast is to basically remove this particular letter that I give as an help from the list yet to be guessed, right? And what happens when I receive this broadcast? So I say when I receive, let's say, remove chosen letter. Now remember, this act is exactly same as removing the duplicate letter, I mean, sorry, the entered letter from yet to be guessed, right? So I can just take this whole code and say item number of, again, not entered letter, but in fact, help letter, right? So if I remove the item number of help letter from yet to be guessed, then I'll notice that yet to be guessed list gets updated. So let's say, for example, the word is flaws. If I click, let's say F has been chosen, and I notice that F has now been removed from this list as I wanted. Now, since I'm using a virtual keyboard, I will in fact implement a little bit more, and remember that these keys have all a unique ID. So in this, in this broadcast, I can add a little bit of a condition. I can say that if, I want to make sure that if a particular letter has been given as, let's say, as the help letter, then I want to basically highlight that key. So for that purpose, I'm going to create a variable here, right? I think I already have this called help letter ID, and I'm going to set help letter ID to item number of help letter in all letters. So what exactly is going on here is that I'm figuring out which item have I got in this in the list all letters. Remember, the list all letters doesn't change. Okay, so just a minute here. So I should do set help letter ID. Okay, sorry, to be careful on these. So I say set help letter ID to item number of help letter in all letters, right? Because for example, remember, if A has been provided as as a letter, then item basically we're looking at 1, right? So here let me just do this, then I can talk about it. So it's a item number of, say, 1 in all letters. Now you might wonder, why did I use all letters and not yet to be guessed? Because remember, I am going to use this help letter ID to identify a clone. Clone number 1 is costume 1, right, which is A, right? So if I look at all letters, then I have all the costumes, and all the clone IDs effectively can be mapped to that. So that's why I use this, and thereafter I can just put a condition here that if and remember, keyboard ID was my variable which is local to this sprite. So I say if, say, keyboard ID is equal to help ID. Now think a little bit about this. This is very, very similar to what we have done in the in, say, the tux of math, or say in snake and so on. So if keyboard ID is equal to help letter ID, then what do I want to do, right? I also want to highlight this particular key, make its color change, just like I had done earlier, whenever I had the entered letter, right? So I'm just going to copy, duplicate just these two statements. I don't want all of this. I'm going to just remove, say, all of this here, and just do, oops, sorry. So I'll do this here. Right now, this is quite interesting, because what's happening now is that every clone receives this broadcast. Every clone checks what is the ID. If its keyboard ID is this, then it does all of this, right? So basically, every clone gets this, but only one clone which meets this criteria goes and changes its color, right? And now this looks beautiful, because, for example, now the word is worth. Say I get a help, I got O, and notice my O has been changed color here. Right now, at this point, again, I want to highlight that if you are not doing virtual keyboard, that's all right. You can still do this, because remember, we already saw in the virtual keyboard video that you can display letters, right? So with this broadcast, you can also go and display the letters. Say, for example, over here, whatever letter you've chosen, you can just go and display it here, right? All right, so now let's see how we can extend this to become the help incorrect, right? Now, for that purpose, I've duplicated this sprite help correct, and I've called it now help incorrect, and I've also updated its costume so that I can recognize which one is which, right? Now, really, the idea is very, very similar to this. What we are going to do is, again, wait for this sprite to be clicked. Now this time round, I want to repeat this condition until it's not a part of the chosen word. So I'm going to say not over here, because that's the condition I want. I want an incorrect letter to be chosen. However, I want to make sure that this loop enters. So what I can do, I can play a little trick here. I can set this to say letter 1 of the chosen word here. So I should go and say letter 1 of chosen word. Now the reason I'm doing this is to make sure that this condition is not true when first starts, because I'll set it to a letter which is first letter of chosen word. So this condition will not be true, and hence I'll always enter the loop, and I'll make sure I pick up a letter which is not part of this letter, right? Now with this done, in fact, amazingly, we are almost done, because you can imagine that by construction this letter is not part of the not part of the letter. So which means that I just do not have to display it here. I don't want this broadcast, but I do want to remove it from the list and also update my virtual keyboard, right? So let me just hide some of these because it's cluttering the view, and then we can see this in action. So let's say I go and hide these two. In fact, I don't really need this, but let it be. So let's say I will, I run this code. So now the word is tower. Say I choose J, obviously J shows up here and J comes in here. But now let's say I use this facility, right? If I go and click this letter, it picked up for me a Q. Help letter is Q here. Notice Q became, Q became, say, highlighted. And if you look at yet to be guessed, I assume Q would have been removed from this list, right? So notice SPQ. So notice Q has been removed from this list. Now, amazingly, we can easily extend this to remove bunch of letters. For example, let's say I want to remove, say, 5 or say 10 letters from this list, which are not part of this word. So I just have to say, do this, say, 5 times, say for 5 letters. And what I have to do really is to just repeat this 5 times. Every time I go and remove an incorrect letter, right? So if I go and, for example, click now my word is, say, spook. Say I click this. Notice it has picked up 5 letters and removed them from this list and also highlighted them over here. So these 5 letters we know are not part of the word that has been chosen, right? I do want to highlight one thing here, that this particular, let's say, feature requires a little bit of thinking, because sometimes your list yet to be guessed may have become less than 5 or say less than 10, whatever you're trying. Let's say we try 10 here. Then if I, it's going to remove 10 letters. In the beginning is okay, because we know that the list has a lot of letters. It's removed all these letters, but sometimes this list might have become smaller, in which case you have to do a little bit of check here. But I'll leave that for you for a more careful development. You have to in fact pick the minimum of this or the length of yet to be guessed, because if your yet to be guessed is only 3, you can't remove 10 letters. That's the logic, right? Now, again, if you are not using the virtual keyboard, it doesn't matter. You can still do this. You can still do this whole thing. And like I said, this remove chosen letter will, in that case, display the letters over here. So now let's say I want to extend this to a scenario where I want to give a group of letters, check a group of letters to, see if they are present or not present, and accordingly treat them, right? For example, I might want to show all the vowels in a group, or let's say if we watch Wheel of Fortune, RSTLNE, right? So in this case, I'm going to show you vowels, and I've duplicated my sprite, given it a new costume. So that's blue color thing is for all the vowels. So what I've done is also to create a variable called vowels and set it to AEIOU, right? Because I want to display all the vowels of that word, right? Now here I'm going to approach it a little bit differently, but it's again, similar approach. Basically, I want to just check every letter. So I want to check letter A, then letter E, I, and O, and U. So see if it's part of the word or not, right? So which means that I'm going to use a counter variable. I'm going to set a vowel counter, which is a counter variable, to 1. Repeat this for the length of vowel. So repeat this say 5 times in this case. Set help letter to say the first letter, then the second letter, the third letter, and so on. That's why I keep changing the vowel counter, right? Now, what do I do? So I don't want to do this repeat until thing here just yet. So in fact, what I will do is that I will put an if condition. First thing first, remember, I must make sure that the list yet to be guessed contains help letter, because otherwise it's meaningless to be helping, right? So I'll say if the list yet to be, sorry, here, say the list yet to be guessed contains the help letter. In this case, the if this list yet to be guessed contains help letter, then I have to check whether the answer is correct or not. So first thing first, I make sure that the help is meaningful, and then I go and check if it is the right answer or not. So if the right answer is basically chosen answer contains help letter. If that happens, well, very good. All I have to really do is to just broadcast correct help like we had done earlier. If not, which means yes, help was meaningful, but it's not a correct word, then I have to just go and click, let's say, remove chosen letter. Right? Now this amazingly, it's quite interesting actually how this thing works, but we can see this already. So let's say my, let's say the word is blame. If I click on this, A and E get listed out. So A and E get listed out here, but as you can imagine, 5 letters get selected because those are the 5 letters that you tried, right? Once again, we can try this. So if I click on this, now the chosen word is colic. If I do O and I get listed here, but I know I've tried A, E, I, O, U, right? Now you can actually change this. Say you say, I want to do R, S, T, L, N, E. Now this is used in, uh, Wheel of Fortune. So if you do this now, the word is Agora. So let's say I try this. Notice R, S, T, L, N, E have been highlighted. Only R was in part of this, right? So I hope you found this useful. There's a lot of coding. Go slow, go systematically. You'll really enjoy this, right? Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.